Even when I walk across the street, you know,
We should play the final Jeopardy music right now.
Almost.
We're getting really close.
It's 7 now, but it's connected.
Oh. Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this regular meeting of the Town of Griswold Board of Finance to order August 20th, 2024, 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Meeting Room. First order on the agenda is the roll call to order.
We have all members present.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, make a motion that we transfer 4F executive session to 6B under any other business.
okay.
No second.
Okay, we have a first and second to move the executive session to follow any other business. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye,
Any opposed? Motion carries.
thank you.
Okay, item 2, public forum. Does anyone wish to speak? Hearing none, we're going to move on. Item 3, approval of minutes. A, July 16th, 2024, regular meeting minutes.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second to approve minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're going to vote. All in favor?
Aye,
Any opposed? Motion carries. 4, new business. 4A, auditor presentation on fiscal year 23 audit. We have Mr. Christopher King from King and King and Associates here, who is our auditing firm, who's here to give us a quick, I guess, overview and answer any questions you might have with regard to the audit. Mr. King, I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Okay, should I just sit here? Is that okay?
That's fine, absolutely.
So hopefully it looks like you handed out the summary I have, so I'll go through the summary and, kind of the intent of that is to try to answer questions before you ask them. But then when we get to the end, I can hand it back to you and we can ask questions along the way to you.
Fair enough.
So looking at the audit here, it's for the year ended June 30, 2023, which is now 13 to 14 months ago. Some of this will be repeat for some of you, but just to go through the sections of the audit. And keep in mind that generally, as you go through the audit package, the 75-page package, the further you go into it, the more detailed you are. So you start with a very high summary level and get into more detail as you go along. Very first section, management discussion and analysis, kind of like you would find in a publicly traded company. Very condensed, it looks at the town as a whole, but also there's some bullet points on economic factors. If they could talk about major capital projects, major borrowing, changes in mill rates. You could say it's for investors, you know, what investors would the town have? Well, those are bondholders. So when you do borrow, you sell your bonds on the market, this is part of the package that they look at. You don't look at it much to plan to run your town, I'm sure. Then we have the financial statement audit, which is really 3 sets of financial statements. Very summarized government-wide approach, then full accrual, then a modified accrual set on a fund approach, and then a budget basis comparison of your adopted budget versus actual expenditures. This is kind of why you end up with 75 pages in an audit report. In addition to that, because of your grant funding, you get a Connecticut single audit, the grant compliance audit, as long as you have more than $300,000 of state grants in a year. That's being raised to 500,000, but you're still going to be over that. Virtually every town and state has this every year. Federal single audit threshold has been 750,000, which almost everybody had with COVID money. Some of that's starting to dry up, but a lot of towns will still have a federal single audit every year. That threshold's raising up to $1 million, which again, most towns, certainly if you have one bridge project, a lot of education funding, you'll stay over $1 million. These things are probably benefiting more smaller nonprofits that occasionally get a big grant, then they don't have to have full grant audit just because of a 1 year, one-time thing. Then the last section is, on initials, BOEFS, it's the Board of Ed, electronic, I always forget it, financial system. The Board of Ed has to transmit their data, financial and some demographic data, up into the state's system. And then the state gives us a list of procedures that we use to test basically that data uploaded. So we get reports, and then that report is not in this package, it goes to the superintendent of schools and State Department of Education. And that's generally done, well, it's always done after the audit, because it has to reconcile to the audit, so it has to be done at the end, the final stage. Then if I flip the page to highlights of the annual financial report, and again, this refers to your 75-page remaining audit report. Just briefly mentioned here, pages 11 and 12. That's that full accrual basis, government-wide statements where all your funds are crammed into one column. There's depreciation, there's long-term debt, handled just as if you were for-profit entity or debt is a liability. So that's a contrast to these next pages, pages 13 and 15. Page 14 is a weird reconciliation page between pages 11 and 13. But this gets to be a little bit more what you can digest. This is the fund basis. So the general fund is in here. Your general fund balance was $8.3 million. That was an increase of about 250,000. We often get the question, how much fund balance should we have as a town? That is a management decision. But one of the benchmarks of the Government Finance Officers Association, they say you should have 2 months of your budgeted revenues in surplus or in fund balance. That's 16.67% of your revenues. Past year, you were at 21.6%, so you at least meet or exceeded that threshold. Some people wonder, especially a really small town, you know, is it okay to have more than 16.67%? And I always give this story, which rings very true. This week, I always say, well, if you're the city of or the town of Manchester or Norwalk, and you have two culverts, box culverts wash out, may not be a huge deal, but to a smaller town, 2 box culverts is a big deal. So now we'll get Oxford this week, who's paying EMS and public works and private contractors 24/7 right now. They're probably blowing through hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the second time it's happened to them. We were supposed to be out there today doing their audit, and we had to cancel. A number of years ago, when we first came on, they had a big windstorm and trees were all over the place. It was a disaster. So anyway, that town, and you know, could be any other town, is now loading out tons of cash. So if they were really lean, they might be a little tight, because they're gonna get reimbursed by FEMA, but that FEMA reimbursement may take 2-3 years. One of your other major funds, major and non-major, is simply a mathematical test. If it's big enough, according to the test, it's major. Your community multipurpose field, so that's temporarily a major field program, because it had $3 million of expenditures. That was a big capital project during the year. If you look at that fund in the financial statements, you'll see it had a negative fund balance, because on the fund basis, debt is revenue. So when you bonded for it in February of this year, that revenue went into the general fund and then replenished that capital project. Your other major fund is ARPA, again, similar to many other towns. You got the 2 big installments of ARPA money. During this past year of 23, spent some money on water infrastructure, and then you had just over $2 million left at June 30 a year ago. Next page is just a colorful chart of your fund balance in the, just the general fund. And you really only have the two categories, unassigned and assigned. For you, assigned pretty much means what you decided to use to balance the next year's budget. So I think the budget you just finished, it was 850,000. So out of the 914 that shows up as assigned, 850 was what we had said, in lieu of taxation, we're gonna take from surplus to balance the budget. And then the blue portion is the just the regular unassigned, unspoken for part of the general fund. So then we continue past the major funds, we get into the notes of the financials. So again, more and more detail. There's a section on your capital assets. That's around page 26, and you would see $3 million of construction process for the community field. Then after that is your debt and liabilities. So you do have borrowed bonded debt that you're paying down, excluding the new issue that you have now. You're paying down about 1.5 million a year. I think there was $16 million at the end of 23. But there's also other liabilities, and the biggest other liabilities are retirement related, whether it's pension or other post-employment benefits, which is a health insurance subsidy. So these are all actuarially determined liabilities. Your biggest pension is you're actually part of the state CP MERS, the municipal employee retirement system. Their liability or your share of it actually went double from 5 million to 11 million. And from the accounting side, we weren't easily able to figure out how that happens. The actuaries determine it. And we've got this other component that I didn't mention earlier, deferred inflows and outflows, where they're deferring charges and amortizing them over years. It seems like those deferred charges or deferred inflows and outflows were adjusted significantly. They consist of experience rating, you know, how many people are participating in the plan, how long are they living or not living, also investment rates affect that. So their actuaries projected that your liability went from about 5 million to 11 million. Now granted, you never pay that at once, you pay that over time, but your contribution also went up, annual contribution from about 900,000 to 1.2 million. So as your projected liability goes up, projected contributions go up. Now, the other big retirement plan that covers employees.
I'm sorry, I have a question. Did you see that that's happening with all towns?
Yes, anyone who participates in MERS, which is a large number of towns and other municipalities. Didn't see it so much in towns that have their own standalone plan.
Mhm.
But again, we're getting into actuarial science, which
Right.
is, which is beyond us. So sometimes we can see they've adjusted a rate, an assumption. This one here, there seems to be a lot of moving parts.
Did that ever go down?
Yeah, so. I think part of it is. You're in a fiscal year, but calendar year 22, the market tanked. So you came out of 2021, the market was booming. They figure, okay, we can assume on investment returns of X. Then you get a year that it tanks, so then they adjust their assumptions back down. And we saw that a little more directly on single town plans. Again, MERS is such a huge consortium that you're kind of spreading the cost with a lot of people.
Oh, 2024 with the stock market going up, is that gonna change this year's audit?
Potentially, I can't say for sure. Especially because normally they spread this out so that your liability doesn't have peaks and valleys. This was unusual that it was,
Yeah,
High.
it's unusual, so that's why I'm asking.
you know,
It's so unusual because it tanked and because it goes up that much, is it gonna be unusual again?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess that would be a question, to put to the MERS pension committee. See what they would.
Oh, I don't know them, maybe you do, I don't.
Well, they're a state agency, you pay into them, you can you can call a meeting with. Or send Eric, that's probably what we do. So then the other plan that covers a large number of employees is your teacher retirement, certified teachers, but of course, you don't have to pay into that. But, you know, compared to the 11 million for MERS, their liability attributed to the town Griswold, or at least Griswold teachers, is 52 million. Right here, the town is responsible for none of that. The state put in $5.1 million attributable to Griswold employees during that 23 year. And then the last bullet point I have here is just to emphasize pages 30 to 41. We got 12 pages that are just pension and health retirement disclosures. So it's kind of an indicator of how complicated this has become. And then all those plans, liabilities roll into the financials. That government-wide statement at the beginning has the first inflows and outflows. The next page, I talk about your budget. The budget is going to be the closest statement to what you see on a periodic basis, that is the most familiar. Did have a budget surplus for the year of $476,000. And that was mostly to the, your expenditures were under budget by almost that same amount. But also you anticipated that you were gonna be 600,000 in the hole. You had budgeted 600,000 of surplus to balance the budget. You actually didn't need that. Your revenues were up enough and your expenditures were under another that you did not have to tap into the surplus. Which is probably why this next cycle you're budgeting 850, your fund balance is still going up. Then beyond that, there's a lot of individual fund statements. So if you wanted to see your county and road fund, you would see activity, a little balance sheet and income statement for that. Then we get to page 68. Page 68 is the tax collector schedule, and it shows the beginning of outstanding taxes by year. And then current levy and then collections on that, and then how much is outstanding at the end of the year. So you had $1 million outstanding at the end of 23, which is 4.7% of the annual levy. We always do these calculations to see if things are falling in line. We see people between 2 and 6%. You're starting to get to the higher side of that. But you've got those two solar companies that are trying to claim exempt status that the tax collector is trying to collect. So those two accounts alone are kind of driving up your receivable balance.
When you said, your budget's for 800,000, is that what you said for this year?
I think the year that just ended, you had put in 850,000.
Or,
To use out of surplus, which we've talked about. For the current year we're in now, we didn't use it.
okay,
It was last year that just ended.
last year.
Well, it's historical.
I'm going backwards.
And then I just want to point out, the very last section, you have historically, these are optional schedules, but you've had them historically. You have 10-year trend schedules, on basically financial position, so you can see them, horizontally, trends in, where your financial position are, revenues, expenditures, also taxation, there's debt per capita tables in there, so you can see the bonded debt per capita. I think it's about $1,500 per capita in Griswold right now. So just to let you know, that's there. The next page, we talk about the federal and state audits. These are the two smaller packages, the grant compliance audits. This is also where findings are, whether they're grant compliance findings or financial statement findings. But for the state side, you received $14 million of state sourced grants, of which 11.7 million is PCS, special ed, so that's the Board of Ed, vast majority of Board of Ed. And then on the federal side, you had 3.3 million of federally sourced money, even though a lot of it comes through the state. Again, a lot of it was Board of Ed related, and a big chunk of it's COVID related. 774 was ESSER money, special ed 392, school lunch. school lunch was still 100% funded, so it was over 900,000. So a lot of, majority of the federal money was also in Board of Ed. And then on the last page, you would see these findings, you'd see mirror images in the state and the federal reports. We had no findings on grant compliance, but we had what are called financial statement findings. So I put a summary of what they were and the corrective action that was put in place by the town. The first one, reconciling the Board of Ed to the town. So that's reconciling, the Board of Ed takes $100 out. First numbers are much bigger, but $100 out of the general fund. And then the Board of Ed should report $100. That's oversimplifying it. This is probably our most common finding that we have, and honestly, other audit firms have in the state of Connecticut. It's a combination of complexity and staffing, I would say, are the two factors. You know, we go back to that EFS report I was talking in the beginning. EFS used to be called the EDO01, now it's the EFS, and then they added EGMS, and one superintendent told me, this is a couple years ago, she said, my business manager now manages 32 grants, and we used to manage 4 grants a year, so the complexity has gone up around the Board of Ed, and again, the ability to get staffing, to get people in those positions has gotten tougher. The corrective action on that is more regular meetings between the Board of Ed side and the town side to do those reconciliations through the year. And I've read the minutes, so I've been seeing that, we've been following up on that. And then the other comments also were over regarding Board of Ed accounts outside the main central purchasing of and payroll of the Board of Ed. They have these ancillary funds, a lot of scholarship funds, and there's student activity funds, and a surprising amount of money goes through those accounts. And so the corrective action over those ancillary accounts, there's actually several procedural changes they were going to do, such as the student activity accounts. Student activity accounts used to just be held, and this is all over the state, at the schools. And somebody in the school office was handling all this money that was coming in and out, and it doesn't really work well. So over the years, schools have been consolidating that into the central office. That was one of the changes they're making, and then some changes of responsibility to people. So those are the corrective actions. And that's the end, as fast as I can go. Hand it back to you.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Chris?
I have a question.
Go ahead, yeah.
When you identify material weaknesses and significant deficiencies, do you follow up the following year to see if the corrective actions that were taken made the resulting data better or worse, or compliance, I guess I
Yeah.
should say, better or worse?
Yeah, definitely. As a matter of fact, if we were in the actual report, they're numbered. And the material weakness was actually numbered 22, because that was the first year we reported it. Then we repeated it in 23. So, and then the other two were from 23, I believe.
Mhm.
So, yes, yeah. And even if sometimes, I can't remember off the top of my head if we had any, but sometimes we have things that are in a file that don't even make it. There's discussions we had, they're not in writing. Those we also carry forward. And actually, these corrective action plans get filed with the state of Connecticut.
I do.
It's not a complete reporting package unless you have the corrective action plan.
And are they part of the public record?
They are.
So if there's a town somewhere in Connecticut that just discovers a magic bullet to fix things much more easily and simply and efficiently, do you alert other towns that you might want to look at what town ABC did, because this might help you solve your problem, or do you have to stay out of it?
I can't think of a situation where that's actually worked. Or I should say where it would apply. Everybody, we have 169 kingdoms. And they're all unique.
I understand.
And the state has a questionnaire as well. When you submit this, they ask if any findings have been repeated for more than 2 years. And they will send letters. Actually, I had Department of Ed sent a letter to another town that had a repeated finding.
And when you find these findings, how quickly you send it to Eric and the Board of Education when you find these findings? And how quickly does it happen?
Say that varies, depending on what it is. You know, sometimes we might at the time say, well, this is gonna be a finding, or a repeat and say, well, this is what happened last year, what's been done to address it, has it been fixed? I mean,
Is
we,
there a rating of like 1 to 10 on how important it is to get this done like right away?
so maybe this answers your question. Material weakness is of greater severity than significant deficiencies. Because the potential, call it the statement, is larger. I mean, they're reported certainly, when we get to the draft stage, we send out a draft report and we say, these are the findings that we're going to include. And then the various people involved get to review it, ask questions, provide their responses. So it's usually the end of the audit process. Sometimes it's during the middle of the audit process.
Has that happened here? In the middle of the audit process?
Well, certainly we let people know that we're finding problems. We don't hide it all. Or keep it secret till the end, because a lot of times we'll say, we have a problem with this. This needs to be addressed and resolved. So that happens real time.
I'm just looking for a timeline actually over the, when we're informed and how we deal with it and how fast it comes to us. That's what I was looking for.
I'd say it goes to the staff involved real time. It may not be formulated in the wording here, but when we do a test and it's not coming out the way it should, we talk to that department immediately.
And they then report to us.
Say the timeline to you is delayed, but it's more real time with the people who are involved in a particular department.
So certainly I would say, and I don't want to interrupt, but certainly I would say with regard to the listed material weakness. We had live, real-time communications and data with regard to that. Is it Deb Franklin
Yes.
reached out to me personally. We had a meeting. We did everything we could to make sure that that was resolved as expeditiously as possible. So, I mean, I guess to your point, it kind of depends where it falls, in that scale on how quickly some of that data and those messages are delivered. Ours was real time, certainly not on the significant deficiency side of things, but as you indicated, material weaknesses are more severe than significant deficiencies.
Yeah, and that was causing delays.
Right.
And we wanted to get the delays moving along, so.
Right.
So. Yeah, so we did, it depends, there's like the 169 towns, everything is different. But generally the people that are involved know very quickly. The whole board may not know for a while, but the people involved would know first. Then I would say the finance director would know second, then.
So that would be a structural thing on how we would be informed in time when you inform them and they inform us. I mean, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm just trying to figure out, you tell them that what we tell them, they have to tell us and the time frame. Meaning it's up to our town to let us know when you advise them on something that's going on and when we'll find out.
I guess the answer is yes. I know I'm not answering your question directly. I think, again, it depends on, if it was, the assessor's office, we didn't think that the counter approval on the certificates of correction was happening. probably would not be contacting the Board of Finance on that. That's a control issue, you know, COCs are being processed, but we think the controls could be improved. Something like that, we would talk to the assessor, probably the finance director, wouldn't come to you guys till it's a final report, or at least a draft report. But we were encountering delays, and we wanted to move this along, and we wanted to explain why we were encountering delays, so that's why we went to the board. But you are ultimate governance. We try not to jump over people.
I was just trying to figure out the timeline and when, you explained it good enough.
Anyone else?
I mean, so these deficiencies have been addressed.
So we have corrective action.
That is taking place.
So at this point, we've been told it's taking place. I did, as I mentioned, I checked your minutes and I've seen it discussed in the minutes. We would then test it in the next cycle.
So 24.
And we have engaged your firm for 24, so you're obviously going to come in and that's gonna be one of the first things that you look at, and I'm pretty comfortable with looking at kind of both sides of the fence to say that all of these items have been addressed, and we should not expect to see them, they've all been rectified. Because really, they were carbon copy or mirror from 22 to 23, they didn't change.
Yeah. So the timing. By the time you get findings, you're often halfway through or more the next year.
Right.
So the condition exists.
Right.
Right.
So a lot of time, and even if we find something and it's fixed,
Mhm.
if we find it, it's a finding. You know, if the town finds it, fixes it along the way on their own, that means the controls are working. So sometimes we even have findings that say this wasn't done for 9 months out of the year, but it was done by the end of the year. That's because the reporting was done, the process was put in place, and it was fixed.
So I did notice in the notes to the financial statements, the notation that there was no formal policy over the use of fund balance, that was noted. Do you see that as an issue, and something that we should work to kind of close that loop and draft a formal policy, or are you comfortable? And do we kind of match with our peers on that by not having a formal policy?
Yeah, so that's in the notes. That's not an opinion, you know, that's a required disclosure. We have to disclose,
Sure.
do you have one? Or some people will say, we must have a minimum of 10%. If we're below 10%, we have 18 months to get back out. Over 10, we cannot exceed 25%. It's a management decision, you know, and often that might be in a charter or an ordinance.
So in best practices, if the board were to draft a formal policy over the use of fund balance, would you consider that to be in our best interest?
Yeah.
I'm trying to frame that the
Yeah,
best that I can.
I guess I don't have a strong opinion. I am
Okay.
seeing people move towards it.
Okay.
Particularly, there are some towns, so. As you all know, you get elected and then you don't get elected, or you choose not to run, and attitudes and opinions change over time. We have some towns that are running so lean that they truly can't get out of a rut. And at least one of them, the state is watching them and saying, if you don't start taxing your people a whole lot more, we're gonna come in and start doing it ourselves, essentially. So, I think that's maybe sometimes the impetus. People say, well, let's get something in practice based on our, you know, we have this consensus now, let's get it in practice, because you don't know what's gonna happen in the future. This one town, I mean, they keep voting down budgets so that their fund balance is like 3 and 4%. You know, we looked at 16, even 12 to 15 is another benchmark. But in the state is all over them, and their bond rating is going down, and they can't just, you know, add 10 mils in one budget, you know, they'll
Right.
be in trouble. So I think that's kind of why people are doing it. I'm seeing a very slow adoption of that.
All right.
Scott, we do have a policy as far as percentage wise.
Correct.
But we don't have a policy that strictly states this is what we're gonna do if we're over or under.
Right, right. Um. Any, looking ahead to the future. Accounting changes, requirements, or otherwise that you're aware of that we should be made aware of and start to perhaps prepare for?
Well, the biggest ones you've already hit, uh, there's a lease, I think on page 29. Yeah, the 87 went into effect and, basically it's trying to pull lease liabilities onto the financial statements. You could have a 30-year lease for real estate and it didn't show up as a liability. Now that has to be quantified and pulled onto the financial statements.
Mhm.
That was such a big thing. It was delayed for several years. And then there's another one, so I guess it should be implemented now, but people are still getting their heads around it. Subscription-based IT arrangements, which is kind of like the lease, but you're leasing software. Those are the big ones. There is a reporting model change, which is gonna be minor. I won't really notice it. Compensated absences, is kicking in. So the compensated absences will change a little bit. So your liability for that might go up. But I mean, that's 225,000. It's a lot of money, but in the big picture, it's not a whole lot when your pension liability is 11 million. So I really think the biggest one was the leases. That's, and the stuff coming up a little different. There's a change in auditing standards, which you don't see here, but is in how we approach it. I'm getting to auditing theory, but we have to do an assessment of inherent risk now, whereas before we did the control risk. Inherent risk is the risk that a mistake will happen. And then control risk is the risk that your processes won't pick it up. And we've been focusing for years on control risk, and now we have to also emphasize inherent risk. I can't think of anything else major. Again, those thresholds have gone up on the audits. Not gonna impact you. We did get, because we've been pleading with the state of Connecticut, Department of Ed and OPM. OPM won't budge, but Department of Ed did push back a due date for the EFS to January. They gave us 30 more days. Because what we were doing is at the end of December, or month of December, we were shutting down our audits to try to complete this EFS work. And we were shutting down our audits, so we couldn't file audits by December. And then, schools were closed at the end of December. And I think superintendents were sick of us calling them on December 29th to have them go into the system and sign off. So we did get a 30-day reprieve on that. But other than that, no changes on the state side.
Okay.
For relief.
So, picking up on the change to the way that you have to audit now, assuming that the planets are aligned, we have everything ready to go for your firm, when we're supposed to, is this, extra piece in the puzzle, so to speak, and what you've got to do on inherent risk, is that going to now slow down the process? Because normally we want, in a perfect world, audits should be done by 31 of December, correct? So is that now going to kind of draw that out even further, or do you not really see that as an issue?
Not what I described there, but I can just address what we see. We've been talking about it as well in the office. Because obviously everybody wants it earlier. We do expect it to be earlier this year. I don't think 12/31, in part because we kind of have a schedule based on what we know has happened. And Griswold stumbled, kind of fell to the end of the line. And we can't just bring you right back to the front. We have to bring you back. Now someone else will stumble and then they'll go to the end of the line. So we do want to get you done earlier. This reconciliation was actually a big step in that. So I think it would move you forward quite a bit. I don't see 12/31, at least not this year. We can shoot for that going forward.
Okay.
I will say, about 30% of the towns are filed by December 31, and they're generally towns that are regionalized K through 12 education, and there's no Board of Ed in the town. Those towns we can just do faster.
Okay.
So a lot of people focus on those regionalized K through 12 towns and get them done first.
When you say that 12/31 is probably not doable this year, what about 3/31? What, when you say that we fall to the end of the line, it causes me some concern, because if we get everything to you, maybe not perfectly, but in much faster order than we have previously, because of the corrective actions that everybody's worked so hard on. If we have to sit and wait because, you have staffing, management issues as well, everybody does. That would suggest that we would still be waiting a significant amount of time before we know whether we have any material weaknesses or sufficient deficiencies, which then puts us in a situation where we're trying to correct something that's a year and a half old.
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, March 31, I would really like to beat that.
Okay,
Like to beat that by law.
okay,
And when I say the end of the line, we kind of have several tracks with our staffing.
yeah,
And you're not our very last town
Okay.
overall. We have about 4 tracks running simultaneously. And someone else is gonna stumble,
okay,
and we may actually find out next week. We have a good feeling we know who it is.
all right,
Staffing has been tough at towns. The Board of Ed business managers, if you get a Board of Ed business manager, that means someone else does not have a business manager. They're not making new ones. They're just shifting from.
and that's exactly my point. We have people, our finance director, as well as a Board of Ed business manager and finance director. They worked very hard to try to put this corrective action in place, and I want to reward them with having some audit results sooner than, our August meeting. So that's sort of where I'm going.
Yeah, I understand, and like I said, we are planning, we know it's gonna be earlier. How much earlier, I don't know, but we know it's gonna be earlier, we wanna keep moving it earlier. All of our towns were done by June 30. There were 16, 20 towns that were not done by June 30. There's 10 towns that are still not filed.
Mm.
Yeah, so,
I would be more concerned with the towns that stumbled like we did, and the towns that go real quick. So they get
Yeah.
hit better the next time.
yeah,
But
My,
thank you.
Sure. Oh, are we all set? Any other questions for Chris? Okay, thank you
I have
for,
one quick question.
yes.
When you talk about the 16, the 2 months, do you consider unassigned fund balance or whole fund balance? For the GFO recommendation of 16.67.
well. Generally, they actually roll in the capital projects fund as well as the general fund, and we don't often do that because they say the town can tap the capital projects fund. Unassigned, it would be unassigned, yeah. But then, Moody's, when they do their 12 to 15%, they pull in the capital projects fund.
okay, so what?
Oh,
Again?
Moody's, they do that. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because you've got, a town might have $3 million sitting in a fund, municipal reserve to do capital projects.
Right.
That's capacity to complete projects for which you don't have to tax. So they'll look at your general fund plus
That's where we can.
capital projects,
So you're just saying now unassigned?
unassigned general fund. Yeah, that's really what I think the GFOA. The GFOA is a higher standard, 16.67 of general fund. Moody's is 12 to 15 of general fund and capital reserves.
So what makes our rating go up and down? Who makes our rating go up?
Moody's or Fitch.
So we should go by Moody's?
I often just switch one of the benchmarks and I switch it every couple of years in my presentation, so I don't say the same thing every year. So 12 to 15%, Moody's and them used to be 10, then they went 12 to 15.
We should be concerned about who makes our rating.
Yeah, yeah, you don't really care about the GFOA.
I'd say get out of here while the getting's good.
Okay. Thanks. See you.
Thank
soon.
you, Chris.
See you in less than 12 months.
Thank you,
All right,
man.
we'll move on to item B, Finance Director's Monthly Report.
All right, I included FY 24 and FY 25 as well as fund balance analysis. Revenues for last fiscal year that we're still wrapping up. Recorded date, we're at $40,321,301.75. That's 99.72% of budget. This figure should be close to the final number pending any changes as we're preparing for the audit. Based on this figure, we would only need to take around $112,000 from surplus to cover the revenue shortage as opposed to the $850 that was budgeted. So we did really well in revenues, which we've discussed. Expenditures so far to date, we're at $39,509,946.65. That is 97.72% of budgeted expenditures. Again, we're still wrapping everything up. I anticipate we'll finish around $375,000 under budget for expenditures. All the items that were over are included in the proposed transfers that we'll go through later. The cause of each is also in there if you have any questions. So far for the current year, revenues were at $13,583,783.30. That is 32.11% of budgeted revenues, no concerns so far. Expenditures were at $2,468,953.70. That is 5.84% of budgeted expenditures. No major concerns. We do have one item that came in over budget, and that was our liability auto and property. Couple of reasons for this. Property values, they increased on our schedule just due to what the value of properties, real estate especially, have done. And also our broker H.D. Seeger made the recommendation to up our umbrella liability insurance because of what they've been seeing in other towns, such as New Haven had a huge payout that the insurance only covered a small portion of. So based on their recommendations, we did up it a little bit, so that contributed as well. But I'm not too concerned. Workers' comp came in a little lower and we'll be able to cover it, hopefully with some other savings or out of our exchanges.
But that's a one-time expense.
As far as fund balance, right now I'm projecting, if all stays on the path it is at the end of this fiscal year, to be right around 20%, which is 1% over budget. So if things are still looking that way when it comes to budget season next year, we can look at using some of that possibly for some additional capital projects or things of that nature. One-time expenditures, I would suggest using that for. And anyone has any questions, I would be happy to try and answer them.
We're gonna go over the transfers later, you said?
Yes.
You said that we were, looking at approximately 375 under budget
For expenses, yes.
for expenses.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be deducted from what we allocated from unassigned, did we?
Yeah,
that
that'll go
budget
back
year, did we-
into our service.
Okay,
So our unassigned actually is gonna go up a little bit as opposed to taking out the 850.
Right.
Should go up around 250,000.
okay, thank you.
Questions? We're all set. We're gonna move on. Okay, 4C, discussion and possible action on fiscal year 24 budget transfer from Public Health and Safety Committee. It is my understanding that there was a banner that was purchased in fiscal year 23, and there was no money in a line item to purchase that. They're looking for a reimbursement.
How does that happen?
Were they attending health fairs or something?
Well, are you the chair or vice chair, Wayne?
No.
You are the person that purchased the banner though, right? Okay, so I'll let you kind of explain.
Morning Heroes Day on June 15th.
Okay,
We went and had a banner up to the booth and, talked about, we only had a line item, I think it's $10 at the time, I think, Eric, right?
Yeah.
So I purchased it, we agreed to get one for our booth so people would know what the booth was about. And, that's what we said, we couldn't wait till after July 1st.
Is that normal to overspend your budget line?
Is it normal? No. I suppose necessity in the,
It happens though, when you participate in health fairs and that sort of thing. It's not a tremendous amount of money. I think it was made with good intentions. How would we go about covering that expense and reimbursement?
Eric?
You could just cover it with, an exchange account. That'd be fine.
Well, I'd just like to say, I mean, for example, I know it's not a lot of money, but it's not normal just to spend money that's not in the budget. Knowing it's not in the budget. Should have, some sort of criteria on that. Just not guess that somebody else is gonna pay for that, or we're gonna approve it. I know it's a very small amount of money, but we should, knowing that that's not in the budget, we shouldn't spend it. I'll come to the Board of Finance and then ask for the money.
Mr. Bennett,
Go ahead.
so only being here a year now, is this one of those accounts that we just keep a small dollar amount in just to have it open with a small dollar amount? So
In the
really,
past, it has.
really, we would handcuff them to buy anything anyways?
In the
I've
past,
seen
it's
it a couple
kind of
times.
been a placeholder,
Yeah.
unless something comes up and then you guys can do a transfer.
Right, so I mean, in light of information like that, I would imagine that's how these things rise. At least from, again, only being here a year and just seeing a little bit, but catching on to that. That's all I have.
And wasn't there more money appropriated to this for this coming year?
Yeah, I believe $1,000.
$1,000.
So in light of that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 107.50 for the Gridwood Public Health banner.
I'll second
To come from the exchange account? You're
Yes.
including that in your motion?
Yes.
You're including that in your
it.
second?
I sure am.
First and second, any discussion? Hearing none, we're gonna vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item D, discussion of possible action appointing Board of Finance member to School Building Committee. Tom, I believe you have been up to this point, the member. Are you still interested in being the representative?
Yes, I am.
Okay, is there anyone else that is interested in being a representative? And we'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion that Tom is appointed as the Board of Finance representative on the school building committee.
I will second that motion.
Okay, first, second, any discussion? Or now we're gonna vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. E, discussion of possible action on fiscal year 24 budget transfers.
So the Excel looking sheets included in your packet, this will cover the rest of the transfers from what I can see for fiscal year 24. I don't anticipate any other transfer being needed after these. This should do it. Most of them were done within department, but some departments that were over, we did use the exchange account. So we, all in all, like I said, we're in real good shape for expenditures.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Eric, is there any recommendations that any of these bigger numbers that I see, would be addressed in the future budget? Or are they something that's just gonna come up?
It all depends, like, the senior center had some pretty big numbers. That was because we were still learning what some of those expenditures were gonna be with the new building. We're aware of the contracts and everything now. That shouldn't be an issue. One of the other big ones was building repairs here, which we did up that line item this year, so.
The tipping fees?
Tipping fees, that may be an issue this year, but with tipping fees. We did increase it and SCARA is going out to bid for their bulky waste. So hopefully that's gonna help. As far as the SCARA tipping fees, if that goes over. What happens is we bill an admin fee for $4 a ton difference to the haulers, because with the SCARA tipping fees are CWPM and Casella pick up your garbage, residential trash, they bring it to the incinerator. SCARA charges us for that, but what we do is we take that tonnage, we charge Casella and CWPM $4 a ton more. So that you'll see that in our revenues under our recycling fees. So if that goes over, our revenues are gonna go over too, so kind of cancel each other out. But the bulky waste tipping fees, that's all the transfer station stuff that we take to Casella. And like I said, their SCARA is doing a group consortium bid for bulky waste, so we're hoping that price comes down.
The building repair for 21,000 at one time,
Yes,
one time.
yeah.
Motion that we approve the transfers of $78,183.48.
As
Second.
presented. As presented.
Second,
First and second, any discussion? We're gonna vote, all in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5, old business. 5A, discussion and possible action on funding protective glass in tax assessor offices. We had a last meeting appropriated with $7,400. We were looking for a second quote. I know there's been some moving pieces and parts. Martin, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Yes, I was hoping to have a second number for the glazing. I did talk to the people that did the, screening, for the bulletproofing in the school. I made the assumption that they also did the glass also, but they just do the thing. I got that price, it's $1,800 for that little section window. But I don't have the second number to match, the other one. So, but I'm hoping to have that soon. They did look at it. It's just like everything else, like it's running a little bit.
And this is glazing, so
Well,
that,
it's like a sheen that we don't want to use the word bulletproof anymore, but it's bullet resistant that goes inside on the glass. So when the bullet or a projectile comes through it, it kind of catches everything and,
right, okay,
it's like a screen, it's like almost like a screening, like a tinting glass type of thing, but it's made of different material.
Yeah.
Film, something.
Okay.
I really don't know the exact term. I certainly have the quote, but I don't know the exact terminology.
Okay.
But it is the same vendor that the school used for their sections of their stuff.
Okay. If there aren't any questions, do we want to just table it until,
I'm
Karen?
just like, can I ask a general question?
Sure.
Was there any incidents over this past tax thing that we had any problems with the tax office and the assessors?
Not that I'm aware, but I don't know.
That's all I have.
Okay.
so, Mr. Chairman, if we could just. How much was the glass cost, the proposed glass and installation cost originally? 7,500?
We appropriated more in the event that there was some cost overruns. I think that the Do you remember what that figure was,
Yeah,
Martin? 60 something?
the glass was a pretty reasonable portion of that, but then there was some, counter modifications that I wanted to happen also, and that was done by Public Works, so I really didn't have an exact number on that. But with the glass, which was 4,500, I believe-ish, I should have brought it, I didn't know it was on the agenda. And then the screening, which is 18, so that was the two numbers I have.
So are we still within the amount that we appropriated? Or do we need more money?
So we've appropriated $7,400 so far. Do you believe we're gonna end up within that or
You're gonna be a little high, it's gonna be a little higher by the
maybe
time.
a
you
little
do
bit higher
By the time you do the.
with the film? Because the film's
The
gonna.
film and the woodworking.
Yep. Okay, so
I
what?
can have an exact number for you if you need it.
Okay, so why don't we table this? If we could get a motion to table this until our next meeting,
I'll
and
make,
we'll look for,
I'll
we'll look for that
I'll
number
make
for
a
next week.
presentation.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
just for clarification, if we go over 7,500, it has to go off the bid, correct?
With this, it'd be different because it's gonna be two different
Right,
contractors.
multiple contractors.
One for the glass and one for the glazing.
a motion to table.
Second,
Everybody first and a second to the table until next month, when we'll get the updated, pricing.
And I still have you.
All, any discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The update and discussion on bonding projects.
Sewer is progressing pretty well. They said they're a little ahead of schedule when we had our meeting last week. No change orders yet, so everything so far, so good. The water bids came in last week. They were right around where the engineers were estimating, so that's a good sign, and they're reviewing them now. That's for the water main. And then, they're still working on details on the water tank for that to go out to bid, but things are progressing. That's about all I have on that.
The time frame is still the same.
We're hoping all the pipes are in the ground this year. With the sewer, it will be. We're hoping for the water, the main will be in this year too, but we'll have to see.
For the sewer, this is, the sewer, extension. Are there certain projects that are expected to want to tie in right away? And what is the estimated flowage that they would represent?
Right now, we don't have any because that whole corridor's empty, so
Okay,
right now, there's nothing definitive. There's a lot of contractors talking, but nothing that can be disclosed right now.
Can you just refresh our memories? Where the monies are coming from for the sewer portion and where the monies are coming from for the water portion?
Sewer is a USDA grant / loan. It's 3.575, 2% loan, 3.575 million. And then a grant for $1,550,000. So, that's for the sewer, and then the water is through the Connecticut, DECD, that's for 8.7 million. And the bids that came in for the water main were right around 2.9 million.
So our only liability then for long-term will be the USDA loan?
Right.
We won't have to worry about the bonding side that was already approved.
No.
Okay,
As long as the water project stays within
sure.
the estimate.
and the water project is essentially attached or contiguous with the private company, which is the water company, correct? So, but they will own those water mains, correct?
Yeah, we will turn them over to us.
So refresh my memory on the deal as far as how they're gonna pay this off over time with like a surcharge on their billing?
This is just gonna be a state funded grant.
Okay,
for the
so
whole-
we don't have to pay for any of it?
No.
Okay, thank you.
And then they will own the system and the water tower, which will be taxable to us.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Very good. Okay, 5C update from Fire Department and Recreation Budget Subcommittees.
Recreation, the summer's been really tough, for me, and I do apologize. But Tom and I have made an appointment with, Eric to get our, tutorial on Monday of next week, and then we'll be meeting with the rec director after that, after we know how the land lies after Eric brings us up to speed.
All right, on the fire department side, we've had two meetings. Last meeting that we had in July, we came up with quite a few different items, suggestions. I had some concern because as part of what we're trying to do on the accounting side of things, it was going to carry over, and I did not want to step on the toes of the selectmen. There are a number of moving pieces and parts within that policy that Matt and Eric and I felt really was not within our scope, that it really fell within the selectmen. I talked to Tina about it and expressed my concerns. She was comfortable with us proceeding to try to at least come out with some sort of a draft policy on how the whole recruitment side of things was going to work. So it was going to have areas that the selectmen obviously are 100% charged with. There are going to be a few areas in there that we're charged with. So the intent was, once that was done, that at one of the selectmen's meetings, it'll be presented. I'll go, and hopefully both chiefs will be there as well to kind of discuss an overview. Right now, there's no policy in place on how it works, how those figures are derived, what the requirements are and whatnot, all the way through. And for a fairly large portion of that, we had some concerns on how would that affect us in an audit? How would that affect us in terms of financial accountability and how that's structured? Any kind of stipends, that's handled by the selectmen. We're not involved in that part of the process. As the saying goes, they figure out what contracts they want to assign and what they want to do. We figure out how we're going to pay for it. And it's the same with this. But our concern was that there were some kind of gaping holes there, because while they are volunteers, they are also receiving stipend. There are taxes that are getting taken out. So technically they could be considered for that portion employees, as it falls under that umbrella, that definition. We were hoping to have some more information and maybe a draft policy for this, our upcoming meeting. Looks like that's not gonna happen. So we've got another meeting set up for the third week of September, where we hope to have kind of everything finalized for a draft to be able to kick that around and then tweak that. So I'm pretty confident that moving into the upcoming budget, we should have everything addressed, certainly on our end. And as we made perfectly clear at the last meeting, that any negotiation on changes to the formulas or whatnot, that really needed to be handled by the Board of Selectmen, not the Board of Finance. It was our recommendation, because we did explore whether or not the existing system that they have in place on how the retention payments are made and what the qualifications are. We compared that to it was requested that we look at it on perhaps a pay per call. We did a pretty deep dive into that, and our conclusion was that the way that it currently is working suits both departments the best. We recognize that both departments are very different. So we felt it was important enough that you have one system in place that covers both, as opposed to trying to come up with a myriad of different systems, and that there is no perfect scenario, perfect system, that this one comes about as close as we could, as we could hope for. So our recommendation was that we keep the existing system in place as part of drafting this policy. Matt, am I missing anything?
No, that's, I think that's all of it, and then hopefully wrapped up September meeting.
And moving on, update from Capital Improvement Planning Policy Subcommittee.
I requested dates. We haven't, Gail was out for a while, so I wasn't able to nail down a date. I did create a draft policy and sent it out for everyone to review prior to meeting. I will try and coordinate again on a date. Hopefully, I'll see if everyone's available someday next week that we can get together and go over the draft and hopefully make changes to be ready to finalize something next Board of Finance meeting, or I'd like to do it before Capital starts meeting, which they plan on starting in September. So that is our goal.
Okay. Great. Item 6, any other business? Does anyone here have any other business they'd like to bring up before the board? Okay, before we enter an executive session for 6B, I do have one item that I want to bring up under any other business. And I want to just briefly talk about the Heritage River project. There's been some rumblings that's come to my attention that as part of this project moving forward, there is a significant likelihood that Heritage River is going to be applying for a tax abatement. This is not a discussion on what everybody's opinions are and whether you're for it or against it. That's not the purpose of this right now. This is to make everybody aware that that is in all likelihood coming down the pipeline. There is an ordinance that speaks to the tax abatement process. It's not a guarantee. There's a model that can be modified, and the Board of Finance is part of that process. If I'm not mistaken, it starts with an application process to planning and zoning. It then goes to the EDC for their recommendation on on what they recommend. From there, it then goes to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance then is able to comment and make recommendations to be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen for their consideration. Depending on what the Board of Selectmen decide they want to do, they can they have the true authority whether or not they decide to send it to town meeting or not, or whether they want to take the recommendations under advisement, come up with an entirely different, plan and then move forward. I had asked Eric if he could make some copies of that ordinance, just because I think that it's good for us to get ahead of it so that we're familiar with the process before we get to that point. Because I don't know when that point's gonna come.
Okay.
That's really all I have with regard to that. Anybody have any comments, questions? Okay. In that case, we're gonna move on to 6B.
A motion will move to executive session.
I need you to make that motion, reading the entire verbiage of that line item. And then I also need you to, I'm also going to need you to invite in the following people. Eric Christensen, the Board of Selectmen, and the Borough Warden, Lori Sorter.
I make a motion, we move the executive consent, session discussion on the matter of that would result in disclosure of public records that are exempt from disclosure. Also like to invite Eric, Finance Director, Who else did you say?
the Board of Selectmen
Board of Selectmen
and the Borough
and the
Warden
borough
into executive session.
into executive.
I'll second that.
Okay. The first and second, any discussion? Okay, we're gonna vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are entering into an executive session at 8:14 PM.
Turn the heat on.